you're absolutely right. There is really no shame. The master of shamelessness is, of course, Donald Trump, who, 15 times an hour says things are just provably, patently false. But we've come to expect that from him. We're going to have to, I guess, come to expect that for a lot of Republicans in Congress, they operate in very much the same fashion. They say up is down and left is right, and they just make stuff up. And they figure as long as they keep repeating it, people will buy it. I mean, after all, there are a lot of people that have bought the false narrative that January 6th was an ordinary tourist day. And I think their reasoning is, hey, if you can make people believe they can't believe their lying eyes, they can't believe what they all saw or witnessed, then maybe we can make them believe that this big, ugly bill is somehow good for them. But when people's hospital down the road closes, it won't matter whether they're on Medicaid or not. Their hospital is going to close because those Medicaid dollars aren't going to come to that hospital. When their clinic closes, they're not going to be able to try to say, hey, the hospital's really open. You just can't see it. They will not run to the ribbon cutting like they did after the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act and Build Back Better, the infrastructure bill, when they raced to ribbon cuttings that were made possible by a bill they voted against. But they will hide when it comes to the closures from their own bill. And we, nonetheless,
when you tell as many lies as Donald Trump does, and you tell them so poorly, you are bound to get caught in as many lies as Donald Trump does, and they don't just blow up in your face or his face. They also blow up in the face of Donald Trump's liar and Chief Carolyn Leavitt, who is now panicking because a leaked call reveals just how much Donald Trump has been lying to us about his unjustifiable and idiotic strike on Iran, which has completely backfired on him. We are going to get into all of it and how the White House is in complete panic mode. But first, we need to start with an update on what is the actual information, the real truth that we know on this strike, and that comes from Senator Chris Murphy right here.
You were briefed on the strike against Iran on Thursday. Based on the intelligence that you have received, Senator, would you have ordered that strike if you were commander-in-chief?
Well, what President Trump told the country is that that Iran's nuclear capability was obliterated, and it just was not obliterated. In fact, the International Atomic Energy Commission just confirmed that we only set back their program by a handful of months. We were at the negotiating table trying to come to a diplomatic agreement. No, I would not have authorized strikes literally at the moment that we were sitting down with the Iranians trying to come to a peaceful settlement. The only way that you are going to stop Iran from getting a nuclear weapon is an agreement, because as open reporting has suggested, these strikes did not destroy all of their enriched uranium. It did not destroy all of their centrifuges, and it certainly didn't destroy their knowledge. And so it stands to reason that they can reconstitute their nuclear program within months. And what are we going to do? We're going to carry out these massive $100 million strikes every 3 or 4 months? No, you need a diplomatic agreement, and these strikes ultimately set back those diplomatic conversations.
Well, let me follow up with you, because you've said the strikes were illegal because they were carried out without congressional approval. Your colleague, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, actually took it a step further. She said it's grounds for impeachment. Senator, do you agree with that? Is the fact that President Trump acted unilaterally grounds for impeachment?
Well, that's a decision the House makes. That's, not a decision the Senate makes. But it is clear that this is illegal. I know he says that these were, time-limited strikes. They were targeted strikes.
But do you think she's on the right track, Senator? Do you think she's on the right track by suggesting he should be impeached over not going to Congress first?
Well, again, that's a decision the House makes. But I will say, if you compare his conduct in this administration to the conduct that he got impeached for in the first administration, his conduct in this administration is much worse, much more lawless, and much more unconstitutional.
I have to ask you about the big news here in New York. Zohran Mamdani's victory, his big win in the Democratic primary for New York mayor. I am going to speak to Assemblyman Mamdani in just a few moments from now. What lessons do you think Democrats should take from his win?
Well, I think it was a really important win, and I hope Democrats do take some lessons from it. He was laser-like focused on the issue of costs. He was laser-like focused on the issue of transferring power from people who have way too much of it, like the big real estate companies that jack up everybody's rent in New York, and putting that power in the hands of regular citizens. He was authentic, right? I mean, yeah, he's got some views that are a little bit out of the conventional mainstream, but you know what? The traditional political pundits have no idea what's actually mainstream in this country. And when you're talking about costs, when you're talking about de-rigging the economy every single day, when you're presenting big, bold ideas on how to do that, you're going to do pretty well in elections. And so Democrats should learn from his victory.
Now, I talked about this earlier today with friend of the show, Tim Miller, but we saw Donald Trump deny as much as possible that there was any problem with his strike on Iran. And as Tim said, and I thought it was perfectly put analysis, Trump doesn't actually care that the operation was successful. He just wants to cheerlead it as successful. He doesn't care what the real outcomes are. He just wants to be praised, which is why he refuses to admit the actual truth, the truth that is the intelligence coming out of his own Pentagon that this was a failure, and in large part because Donald Trump telegraphed his strike, allowing the Iranians to take the enriched uranium out of the facility. Something Donald Trump was asked about in his interview with Maria Bartiromo, which just makes it so much worse that this call leaked, that we're going to get into. But first, let's take a look at this lie.
Do you think that the Iran regime hid some of the enriched uranium before the strikes?
No. You mean, did they take it out of the deep one? No.
Because you were pretty clear you can't have a weapon. You're going to have to come to the talk. Something's going to happen.
I don't think they did. No, I think, first of all, it's very hard to do. It's very dangerous to do. It's very heavy, very, very heavy. It's a very hard thing to do. Plus, we didn't give them much notice because they didn't know we were coming until just, then. And nobody thought we'd go after that site because everybody said that site is impenetrable. You can't, you're not going to be this way. They did. It's at the bottom of a mountain, and it's granite. Granite's the hardest stone, and it's granite. So, no, they didn't. But I do believe they had people there because you had cars. They were saying cars, and those were masons. Those were people working with concrete. They were trying to seal up the entrance to where the bomb would most likely go in. And they did that. They were working on that, and the bomb went through it like it was butter, like it was absolute butter.
So the site, in the words of Trump, completely destroyed. No way they could move out the uranium, which clearly Donald Trump doesn't understand that process, but that's his position. But what's the actual truth? Well, of course it's not that. And it was revealed in a leaked call that has Carolyn Leavitt in complete panic mode. And we're going to take a look right here. Nonsense. Leavitt melts down as leaked Iranian call. Disputes? Trump bomb claim. White House press secretary. Carolyn Leavitt strongly disputed details from an intercepted Iranian call that suggested damage to the country's nuclear program was not as extensive as Donald Trump has claimed on Sunday. The Washington Post first reported the existence of signal intelligence, which included Iranian government officials discussing the recent U.S. attacks on nuclear facilities. The communications, intended to be private, included Iranian government officials speculating as to why the strikes directed by Donald Trump were not as destructive and extensive as they anticipated. These people said, for his part, Trump has claimed that Iran's nuclear program was completely and totally obliterated. Leavitt did not deny that the call had been intercepted, but disagreed with conclusions suggesting Trump's statements were wrong. It's shameful that the Washington Post is helping people commit felonies by publishing out-of-context leaks. She told the paper, the notion that unnamed Iranian officials would know what happened under hundreds of feet of rubble is nonsense. Their nuclear weapons program is over forever. So Carolyn Leavitt, no surprises, in meltdown mode, and it's so funny because as she freaks out today and says, there's no way they could have moved it. It was completely destroyed, obliterated forever. Lindsey Graham is out trying to get us into a further escalated war by saying, Actually, I think it's the damage has not been done. Lindsey really loves war. Doesn't he just wants to just raring for war? Do you want to enlist Lindsey if you're just really so excited? Like, that seems like an option. I don't know. Maybe we get you some fattings for the Senate and you can just hang out in that. Instead of trying to direct Donald Trump to unconstitutionally go to war, which is what he is doing right now. And a different senator, Adam Schiff, called that out right here.
Republican administrations didn't always demonstrate such hostility to the environment. At a different moment in our history, there was a very different kind of Republican Party. So I'd like to begin tonight by reading verbatim a message from President Ronald Reagan. The date was July 14, 1984. The then president turned on a microphone in the studio here in Washington and took to the nation's airwaves to deliver an address. And this is part of what Ronald Reagan said. My fellow Americans, I'd like to talk to you today about our environment. But as I mentioned earlier this week, in doing so, I might be letting you in on a little secret. As a matter of fact, one of the best kept secrets in Washington. More than 15 years ago, the state of California decided that we needed to take action to combat the smog that was choking the beautiful cities of my home state. Out of that concern was born the first serious program to require manufacturers to build cleaner cars and help control air pollution. The auto industry had to build two kinds of cars, one that would be for sale in the other 49 states, and one that would meet the stiff anti-pollution standards required in California. We had other concerns in California, such as protecting our magnificent and unique coastline, and we took the lead in that area as well. It took the rest of the nation a few years to catch on, but in 1970, the Congress followed California's lead and enacted the Clean Air Act. Other laws to protect and clean up the nation's lakes and rivers were passed, and America got on with the job of protecting the environment. Part of the secret I mentioned is that I happen to have been governor of California back when much of this was being done. Now, obviously, neither the problems in California nor those nationally have been solved. But I'm proud of having been one of the first to recognize that states and the federal government have a duty to protect our natural resources from the damaging effects of pollution that can accompany industrial development. Now, if you're just tuning in, this is a speech from Ronald Reagan. The other part of the well-kept secret, the former president had to say, has to do with the environmental record of our administration, which is one of achievement in parks, wilderness land, and wildlife refuges. According to studies by the Environmental Protection Agency, the quality of our air and water has continued to improve during our administration. In many big cities, the number of days on which pollution alerts are declared has gone down. And if you live near a river, you may have noticed that the signs have been coming down that used to warn people not to fish or swim. We came to Washington committed to respect the great bounty and beauty of God's creation. We believe very strongly, Reagan said, in the concept of stewardship, caring for the resources we have so they can be shared and used productively for generations to come. And we put that philosophy to work, correcting deficiency of past policies and advancing long overdue initiatives. Let me give you some facts that our critics never seem to remember. When we took office in 1980, we faced a dusty shelf of reports which pointed out our predecessors had been so busy spending money on new lands for parks that they seriously neglected basic upkeep of the magnificent parks we had. So we temporarily put off acquiring new parkland and started a new...
We have spent a lot of time, reasonably so, talking about how Trump has lied about the outcome of this strike, but it is equally important to go to the inception, how this started. That was an illegal act by Trump. That is what started this all off, and we can't look past that. That obviously this was idiotic and unjustifiable, but it was also illegal. We have to return to that point. We're certainly going to be making sure no one forgets. Thanks for watching this video. And if you stuck around to the end, drop a blue heart in the comments. And until next time, I'll see you soon.